everyone. I'm just going to let people kind of trickle in here. And while we do that, I'm just going to turn the camera around for a little bit and show you some artifacts and some pieces of history up here in the upstairs of Ashland. So again, just going to kind of let some people trickle in while we kind of get started. This is Wake Up with Ashland. This is our virtual field trip that we have every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. While we're getting set up here and waiting for everybody to kind of join online, why don't you all go ahead and tell me where you're watching from? And if we have any students watching today, and I hope that we do, let me know what school you belong to. Okay, I think we've kind of let everybody get some time to join. We've got Barbara Hamilton watching from Lexington. Hi, Barbara. We've got my colleague Kate is on Ashland's Facebook, and she's going to be providing links in the comments, so make sure you're checking the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Mitch and Julie Sumner watching from Greenville, Kentucky. Hey, Mitch and Julie. Good morning from Boston to Maryland. Good morning, Maryland. Today we're going to be discussing Women's History because this is the last day of Women's History Month. So, of course, we've got plenty of women in the Clay family, and also women who were either enslaved or employed here at Ashland that we can talk about. We've got lots of resources on our website for further research. But today we're going to focus on one woman, and that's Madeline McDowell Breckinridge. So I'm going to turn it around here and show you Madge. Got Madge right here. We are in what today is interpreted as Madge's room, and we're upstairs in the mansion. So Madge, as she was known, and as I'll refer to her through most of this, Madge was a progressive reformer, which for our students, a progressive reformer is someone who was she was working her whole entire career to make progress, to make things better for society. So that's Madge's goal. She was a descendant of Henry Clay. So she was the great-granddaughter of Henry Clay. So we'll just kind of break that down. Henry Clay had a son named Henry Clay Jr., who had a daughter named Anne Clay McDowell, who had a daughter named Madeline McDowell Breckinridge. So that's Madge that we're talking about right now. She was born in 1872, and she lived a short but very powerful and impactful life. Madge was born into a lot of privilege. Of course, she was the great-granddaughter of Henry Clay. And so that kind of came with a lot of status, I guess you could say. So she was born with status. She was born with wealth. She could have just, lived her life, enjoyed the luxuries that she had, and that could have been kind of the end of it. But Madge didn't have that in her. Madge, the entire family says, is the person in the Clay family who is most like Henry Clay. She was most like him because she was witty. She was very funny, and she used that in her work just as Henry Clay did. She was a good speaker, just like Henry Clay. We'll learn a little bit more about Henry Clay's speaking style. You can see Henry Clay here. We'll learn about Henry Clay's speaking style in a future virtual field trip. But she definitely inherited his wit and his ability to capture an audience's attention. And Madge, she worked very hard for what she believed in. She had, again, a very short life, and she knew she was going to have a short life because Madeline McDowell Breckinridge suffered from tuberculosis. So I'm going to show you an interesting artifact here. This is the desk that Madge would have used, and you can actually see a photograph of Madge here sitting at the desk. It's kind of got a glare. There we go. You can see Madge sitting at the desk there. Now, what's this? This is actually a brace for Madeline McDowell Breckinridge's prosthetic. She had a prosthetic leg. So she actually lost one of her legs from tuberculosis. She suffered from it for her whole life. And she lost the use of writing with her right hand. And so what did Madge learn to do? She learned to write with her left hand. We have there Henry Clay's inkwell. But you can actually see Madge using it in this photograph here. So, you know, the legacy of Henry Clay was alive and well in this family. Madge, her most, pressing issue of her day was suffrage, women's suffrage. And for our students watching at home who may not know what women's suffrage is, because it's kind of a funny term for it, it's the women's right to vote. So for a long time in American history, women did not have the right to vote. They had to have their fates kind of left up to men. And Madeline saw this as a great problem. She knew that Kentucky was a violent place, that the politics were corrupt, and she wondered if women might be able to do a better job than the men. And so she wanted to see that vote happen. So that's really what she worked for her entire life. So we'll kind of get back to suffrage in a second. But we'll talk about some of the other things that she was fighting for. And one of those was public parks. So Ashland, I'm actually going to go outside of the room and show you where Madeline lived. So we're at Ashland. She lived here, and she had access to this incredible estate. She had plenty of room to run around. There was a tennis court in the back lawn, what Henry Clay referred to as the pleasure grounds here at Ashland. So you can kind of envision what the lifestyle that Madeline McDowell Breckinridge had. But Madeline knew that she was privileged, right? So she knew that not everyone here in Lexington or around the country had access to something like this estate, open spaces, places to enjoy the nature. That's something that we're all really desperately looking for right now as we're kind of being healthy at home. We want to go out to those public spaces. And Madge knew that. So she actually helped establish public parks. She wanted to make sure that people who didn't have access to a great big backyard, tennis court in their backyard, that they had an opportunity to get exercise, to get fresh air, which was very important to her. So Woodland Park, for instance, Madeline McDowell Breckinridge helped establish Woodland Park. We're going to go back now into Madge's room. Madge also was always trying to make sure that children had opportunities for education. She knew that education was important. So I've got here a photograph, sorry for the glare, of the Lincoln School, which was set up in Irish Town here in Lexington. And it was for families that didn't have a whole lot of resources, underprivileged families. So this was a school that, catered to that population. And also she kind of set up family resource center kind of things, establishments within these schools, allowing parents to be able to come at night and wash clothing so that their families could have a sense of pride and cleanliness and health. This became, more than just a school. It was almost like a community center as well. And so that was something that she prided herself on. She wanted to make sure that others had access to the basics in to have a kind of productive life. So Madge, let's kind of back up here and can see the room a little bit more. Those are some of the progressive, this is for our students who are watching, this was known as the progressive era, the early 1900s. So again, Madeline McDowell Breckinridge, who you can see here, and this is actually her dress as well. It's got a modern Votes for Women. Madge was a progressive reformer and a suffragist. You may hear the term suffragette, and we don't use that term for Madeline McDowell Breckinridge because the term suffragette is actually kind of diminutive. It's intended to personify these women as, maybe lesser than the ETTE at the end of suffragette would kind of diminish what they were doing. In England, suffragettes were women who were using violent tactics, and that's not what Madeline McDowell Breckinridge was all about. She used her privilege and her platform because she was married to Deshay Breckinridge, who you can see here in their matching portraits. Deshay was a newspaper editor, and so she was able to kind of get her messages across in these newspapers. She used her pen, and she wrote incredible articles that were published in newspapers. She spoke all around the country. Madeline became the president of the Kentucky Equal Rights Association and the vice president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. So she didn't use these violent tactics that are often associated with suffragettes. That's why we refer to her as a suffragist, because she used nonviolent tactics. She used her pen, she used her voice. And meanwhile, just remember that Madeline, while she's giving speeches across the country, she was suffering from tuberculosis this entire time, right? So she was not a healthy, young, vibrant woman that you may think if you just kind of looked at her accomplishments on paper. You would think that Madge was a young, healthy woman, but no, she was actually suffering quite a bit, suffering from strokes and tuberculosis her entire life. Kate has put in our comments a really cool quote by Madeline McDowell Breckinridge, which I'm going to read now. Kentucky women are associated poetically with horses and bourbon and politically with imbeciles and criminals. She wanted to change that perception that women were just either to be, sitting at the home and kind of taking care of the more pleasant things in life. No, that they were powerful and they knew what they were talking about, and they had a vested interest in their civic life. So civic life for our students is participating in voting. It's knowing what's going on in your community. And that's something that you're going to continue to learn about through your education. So Madge, she's writing in newspapers. She's kind of making some enemies as well. We have Governor Morrow of Kentucky, who signed the ratification of the 19th Amendment. The 19th Amendment was the one that gave women the right to vote, but he was not for women's suffrage at the beginning. And neither was her husband, Deshay. But she had this persuasive personality, and she was able to get her point across. Governor Morrow of Kentucky was writing against women's suffrage, and one of the more famous Madeline McDowell Breckinridge quotes is that Kentucky women are not idiots, even though they're closely related to Kentucky men. Now, Madge, was using some humor here. Of course, we know that Kentucky men are not idiots, but this was just something, this is kind of how contested this fight was getting. So it's kind of interesting. Now, 1920 comes around. Madge has been working her entire career to see this moment happen. Think about this. 1920, what year are we in right now? We're in 2020, right? So 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, was passed. Madeline McDowell Breckinridge, in November of 1920, was able to cast her vote for unfortunately, the losing candidate. His name was James M. Cox. He was the Democratic candidate. But she was able to cast her vote. And just a couple of weeks later, on November 25th, Thanksgiving Day, 1920, Madeline McDowell Breckinridge was working to make sure that underprivileged families had meals for the holiday. She died of a stroke. And so she knew, again, that she had a very short life to live, and she wanted to make as much of an impact as she possibly could. And so Madge, her entire career working for women's suffrage, got to see the ratification of the 19th Amendment. You can see Governor Morrow here. And right here, you can see Madeline McDowell Breckinridge. And right here, you can see the bust of her great-grandfather, Henry Clay. So she got to see the ratification of the 19th Amendment 100 years ago this year, and she got to vote for the president one time before she died. So a truly remarkable woman. She is definitely one of the most influential women in Kentucky history. And so I'm going to kind of open it up now for questions. If you have questions about Madge, if you have questions about other women of Ashland, please go ahead and place those in the comments now. Otherwise, I'll just kind of take another sweep around the room so you can see some of the artifacts here that belong to Madge. So we have this room interpreted as Madge's room. Kate asks, what are some of the causes in your life? So yeah, what are some of the things that you all are passionate about today, especially of our students? You're inundated, meaning you're constantly having to watch kind of things in the news, and I know that you have things that you yourselves are passionate about. So maybe it's historic preservation, maybe it's something else. So if you want to place those in the comments now, what's the thing that you are fighting for or that you would like to fight for? Madge was really interesting because, Henry Clay fought his entire career to keep the Union together. And he did that through compromise. Again, these nonviolent tactics, he wanted to keep the Union together. And Madge did the same thing. Through her wit, through her persuasive speech, she was able to get what she wanted. So truly, she was a legacy of Henry Clay. That's why she's included on, of course, the signature Henry Clay tour that you can take here at Ashland. But also she's a prominent figure in our Women's Voices tour. Last year, we launched our Women's Voices tour, which is all about 9 women of Ashland. So these women who saw a whole, 2 centuries of political and social change for women. Think about Henry Clay's wife and Madeline's great-grandmother, Lucretia. We talked a couple of rooms ago in the drawing room, we talked about the type of work that women were expected to do, the roles that they were expected to fit in, the boxes they were expected to fit in. And Madge wanted to break all of that down and make sure that women had the opportunity to contribute to their own society and determine their own fate. So Madge is definitely in the line of a lot of strong Clay women. We talk about, on the Women's Voices tour, Josephine Russell Irwin Clay, who was the pioneer horsewoman of Kentucky. She wanted to be independent, and she said that if her boat was going down, then she wanted to go down with it. So you can kind of think about some of the strong women in the Clay family. Barbara Hamilton says, what a role model for us all. Any idea if Breckinridge Elementary in Lexington is named after Madge? Absolutely, it is named after Madge. So we do have her legacy very clearly here right in Lexington, just maybe a mile across Richmond Road from Ashland, is Breckinridge Elementary, which is named after Madeline McDowell Breckinridge. So if we have any students from Breckinridge Elementary who are watching today, I hope that you learned something, but I also hope that you knew some of this already. I know that your teachers do a great job of kind of talking about who Madge is and why your school is named after her. Okay, well, I'm going to just kind of do another little sweep and show you this room the landing, the upstairs landing. And, you know, in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, we'll be up here talking about Henry Clay. I do also want to show you some items that we have in our museum store that are all about women. So these are things that you can purchase online, or if you don't see them on our online store, you can call or email Phil Janes, who's our retail manager, and Kate's going to put that in the comments section, his email address. But just kind of want to show you some of the cool things here. We have a tote bag and a t-shirt that say Votes for Women, and they're based on these cool buttons that Madge wore. So you can actually see here, we've got keychains, we've got buttons. That's something that the suffragists wore. These buttons and sashes. We have Madge's famous quote, "Kentucky women are not idiots, even though they're closely related to men," on a tea towel. We have great books about Madge and about Kentucky women. And we even have the Women's Suffrage Centennial Chorus, who sing suffrage songs. And I want to actually show you number 17, which is a parody on the Old Kentucky Home, 1920. So the lyrics of that were written by none other than Madeline McDowell Breckinridge. So it's just kind of a play on My Old Kentucky Home, but it's all about suffrage. So it's a cool song, and the suffragists definitely utilized singing and wit in their gatherings and their rallies. And so Madge was definitely someone who did the same thing. If there are no questions, and I don't see any coming in our comments, we're going to end there. Okay, I see something from Betty Simpson. She was a champion of cleanliness, and today we are so focused on cleanliness due to COVID-19. Absolutely. So Madge was somebody who was, she had the resources to make sure that her home, her family, everything was neat and tidy and clean. But that's why she championed the Lincoln School, which again turned into kind of a community center. Women could come and bring their clothing, their sheets, all of their linens, and wash them to make sure that their family had a clean, comfortable home. So very good point, Betty. Thank you for commenting there. I'm going to end it there. We just want to encourage you to go on our website, henryclay.org, participate in our Making History Today, Our Kentucky Families online exhibition. You have an opportunity to submit photos of a family artifact of sorts, which is a really cool opportunity to be a part of a museum. It's an online museum that we're kind of gathering right now. So go to our website, henryclay.org, and click on blog, and you will find it there. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in on Thursday, and we're going to be talking about Henry Clay, the scientific farmer. So we're going to be talking about his farming, his role as an attorney, and his role as a politician. So that's what we're going to do on Thursday. I so thank you all for coming and visiting with us on our virtual field trip and waking up with Ashland. We are really enjoying doing this, and hopefully, we can kind of continue to do this and bring you really interesting stories that maybe we don't have the time to go into detail on our normal hour-long tour. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on Thursday. Stay healthy and stay put, everybody. Thanks.